"You kissed me while I was out," the rancher blurted. The Apache woman smirked. "I saved you." The sun was just beginning to climb above the jagged horizon, casting long golden shadows across the wide, empty plains. The air smelled of dry grass and earth, mixed with the faint tang of livestock. John Harris, a rugged rancher with sun-leathered skin and calloused hands, rose early as he always did. His life had been built on routine, hard work, and the quiet comfort of knowing his land and his cattle. Years of tending the ranch alone had taught him patience, discipline, and caution. Yet on this particular morning, a strange unease settled over him, as if the wind itself carried a warning. John saddled his horse, Duke, a steady, dark bay mare that had been with him for nearly a decade. He checked the fences along the western pasture, noticing a few posts slightly shifted, the ground beneath them soft and disturbed. Something had been here overnight. He frowned. The smell of smoke lingered faintly on the wind, though no fire was visible. He knew the land well, every hill, creek, and ridge, and he had never seen anything like this. The signs were clear. Someone had trespassed, and he feared it might not be friendly. He mounted Duke and rode slowly along the perimeter of his property, scanning the horizon. John had always preferred to handle trouble himself. He was not a man to rely on others, and in these remote lands, help could be hours or even days away. As he moved toward the canyon that bordered his northern pastures, he noticed fresh tracks, hoofprints not quite like his own cattle's. They were scattered and hurried, suggesting panic or escape. His heart began to quicken. Whoever or whatever had been here had left in a hurry, and he sensed danger lingering nearby. Meanwhile, in the shadow of the canyon walls, Nayeli watched. She was an Apache woman, fierce and independent, with eyes that seemed to see through the world itself. Her people had taught her from a young age how to move silently, to blend with the land, and to act decisively when others faltered. She had been following the movements of a small gang of rustlers who had been troubling the area for weeks. Her intuition had led her to John, though she did not know him personally. There was no question in her mind. He was walking into danger, and she could not allow him to face it alone. Nayeli crouched behind a cluster of rocks, her dark hair tied back tightly, eyes fixed on John. He rode with purpose, scanning every shadow, completely unaware of the rustlers lying in wait further down the canyon trail. She admired his determination, but also noted his vulnerability. He was skilled, yes, but the odds against him were growing with every step. She adjusted the bow she carried across her back and considered her approach. Timing would be everything. John had reached the narrowest part of the canyon, a place where the rocks closed in tightly, making escape difficult. He slowed Duke, sensing that this stretch of land was dangerous. Suddenly, a shout rang out from behind a boulder. Figures emerged, rough and aggressive, surrounding him. The rustlers had found him. He gripped the reins tightly, trying to maintain control of Duke as they circled, knives glinting in the sunlight. His mind raced. He was strong, skilled with a rifle, but there were too many of them. Any mistake could be fatal. From her hiding spot, Nayeli assessed the situation. She could see the rustlers were confident, careless even, but deadly in numbers. Her pulse quickened. She had to act and fast. Drawing a deep breath, she moved silently, almost as if the earth itself carried her steps. She knew every rock, every shadow, every ridge that would help her approach unseen. The wind shifted, carrying her presence just enough for her to calculate the timing. Without warning, Nayeli leapt from behind the rocks. She moved with astonishing speed, striking the nearest rustler before he could react. Her movements were precise and controlled, yet fluid like water flowing around obstacles. The gang froze in shock, stunned by the sudden appearance of this mysterious figure. She did not hesitate. With a series of calculated maneuvers, she disarmed another attacker, using his own momentum against him, and sent him sprawling to the ground. John watched in disbelief. He had been prepared to fight, but he had not expected rescue. Even in moments of relief, his mind struggled to understand what was happening. This woman appeared from nowhere, her confidence unshakable, and yet she did not strike recklessly. Every move she made was purposeful, every action deliberate. She was not just strong, she was smart, calculating, and courageous. He felt a mix of awe and disbelief as she dispatched the rustlers with skill he had never seen before. When the last of the attackers lay incapacitated, Nayeli turned to John. He could see her chest heaving slightly, the adrenaline still coursing through her, but her eyes sparkled with a calm, mischievous light. Without a word, she approached him, and in a sudden, impulsive gesture, pressed her lips briefly to his cheek. It was a kiss that carried gratitude, relief, and a hint of daring. John's face turned bright red. He could barely find words. You kissed me while I was out," he blurted, his voice a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and gratitude. Naomi smirked, the corners of her mouth curling with a mixture of pride and amusement. "I saved you," she replied simply, her tone light but confident, as if the act itself explained everything. There was no arrogance, only a quiet certainty in her actions. John could only nod, still trying to process the whirlwind of events. He had faced danger many times before, but never like this, and never with someone intervening so boldly and decisively. After a moment, Naomi stepped back slightly, scanning the area for any remaining threats. The rustlers had been neutralized, but she knew the land was never completely safe. Her instincts were finely tuned to danger, and she could feel it lingering in the air, faint but persistent. John, though shaken, began to regain his composure. He thanked her, his voice steadying as he spoke. Words seemed insufficient for the mixture of relief and admiration he felt, but he tried anyway. You really saved my life," he said, finally finding the courage to express what he felt. "I don't know how to," Naomi waved her hand, cutting him off gently but firmly. "No need for thanks. You would do the same for someone else, I imagine. Besides," she added with a playful glint in her eyes, "you were in trouble, I couldn't just watch." John was struck by her honesty and the simplicity of her reasoning. It was not flamboyant, not boastful. It was practical and true. He realized, for the first time in many years, that life was unpredictable, and courage could appear in forms he had never expected. He studied her face, noting the strength and warmth, the sharpness and grace that radiated from her. There was something profoundly human in her presence, something that drew him in despite the shock of the moment. As the sun climbed higher, the canyon's shadows shortened, and the light revealed the full scale of the landscape. The rustlers were scattered, defeated, and the danger had passed, for now. John adjusted his hat, brushing sweat from his forehead, still trying to process the events. Naomi, standing nearby, seemed almost like part of the land itself, as natural and unyielding as the rocks and trees. "I don't even know your name," John said after a long pause, finally speaking again. He realized that, despite everything, he wanted to know more about this woman who had so unexpectedly entered his life. "Naomi," she replied. "And you are?" "John Harris," he answered, extending a hand. She shook it briefly, firm and confident, yet with a subtle gentleness. The connection between them was immediate, though unspoken, a mutual recognition of courage, skill, and the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. For a while, they simply stood there, the wind whispering through the canyon, the birds calling in the distance, the land stretching out in every direction. It was a quiet moment, a pause between chaos and the unknown journey ahead. Both felt the weight of the day's events and the strange, unexplainable bond that had formed in the midst of danger. John mounted Duke again, feeling the adrenaline fading but replaced by a mixture of respect and curiosity. Naomi followed, moving lightly, her presence confident and assured. Though the immediate threat had passed, both knew that this encounter was only the beginning. The land was vast and full of dangers, and alliances formed in moments like this could change the course of a life. As they rode together toward the safer trails, John felt a sense of humility he had not known before. Life was unpredictable, fragile, and sometimes miraculous. He glanced at Naomi, noticing the way she moved, the way she observed the land, and he realized that courage could take many forms, sometimes in unexpected shapes, and sometimes it could even appear as a fleeting kiss in the middle of chaos. The canyon slowly opened to the plains beyond, sunlight bathing the landscape in warm, golden hues. Birds took flight in sudden bursts, startled by movement, while the distant mountains loomed, silent and timeless. John and Naomi continued their ride, two figures moving through the vastness, bound by an unspoken understanding, a shared experience that neither would ever forget. The day had begun like any other, with routine and quiet, but by its end, it had shifted into something extraordinary. The world had shown its unpredictability, its danger, and its unexpected moments of connection. And as John looked at Naomi, he knew that this encounter, brief but intense, would leave a lasting mark on his life, shaping the days to come in ways he could not yet imagine. Arning light stretched across the plains, painting the land in shades of gold and amber. John Harris had returned to the ranch, but the events of the canyon weighed heavily on his mind. Every sound, every rustle of the wind through the grass reminded him of the danger he had faced and the strange, fearless woman who had saved him. Nayeli had disappeared as suddenly as she had appeared, leaving him with more questions than answers. He tried to focus on his daily chores, moving through the familiar rhythm of tending cattle and repairing fences, yet his thoughts kept drifting back to her. There was a mixture of gratitude, awe, and something he could not quite name. She had risked her life for him, and in doing so, she had shown him a part of the world he had rarely allowed himself to see. A world where courage, skill, and instinct mattered as much as planning and hard work. Meanwhile, Nayeli had returned to her own life in the hills beyond the canyon. She moved with purpose, her mind already calculating the next steps. The rustlers she had encountered were part of a larger group that had been causing trouble in the region for months. She knew they would not give up easily, and if John returned to the canyon unprepared, he could face danger again. Nayeli could not ignore that thought. She had acted on instinct before, but now she felt a growing sense of responsibility toward the rancher she had briefly saved. Days passed, and John could not shake the feeling that he owed her more than just a simple thank you. His pride, usually his strongest trait, gave way to worry. He had no idea where she lived, what her life was like, or even if she would ever return. He had seen brave people before, but Nayeli's presence lingered in his thoughts like a shadow he could not chase away. One afternoon, while inspecting the northern pasture, he noticed something unusual, tracks leading toward the canyon where he had been attacked. They were fresh and his heart sank. Could the rustlers have returned? He urged Duke forward, following the trail cautiously. The land felt different now, almost alive with tension, and John's senses sharpened. Every sound, every movement in the grass became significant. From her vantage point high on a ridge, Nayeli observed him. She had been tracking the same rustlers who had returned, and she realized that John had ventured into a dangerous area again, perhaps unaware of the renewed threat. Her mind raced. She could not let him face them alone. She could feel the adrenaline building in her chest, but this time she knew she had to be even more careful. The rustlers were familiar with the terrain now, and their recklessness had turned into cunning. As John moved deeper into the canyon, he noticed the shadows lengthening. The sun was low and the temperature dropped quickly. He tightened his grip on the reins, alert to every sound. Then he heard it, a soft movement behind a boulder, a whisper of motion that did not belong to the wind. His heart pounded as he dismounted Duke, crouching low, eyes scanning. Suddenly, the rustlers emerged from the shadows, knives and clubs in hand. There were more of them than before, and their expressions were cruel and confident. John's first instinct was to defend himself, but he quickly realized he was outnumbered and outmatched. The rustlers pressed closer, cutting off his escape. Panic threatened to rise, but he fought it back. He had faced danger before, yes, but never like this, and he could feel the weight of his vulnerability pressing down. He thought of his home, his land, and the life he had built here, and a fierce determination ignited within him. He would not go down easily. Before he could act, a shadow moved across the rocks, swift and silent. Nayeli leapt into the fray without hesitation, striking the nearest attacker with precision. John could hardly believe his eyes. She moved like a force of nature, her strength and speed unmatched. She used the rustlers' own momentum against them, flipping one into the dirt and disarming another with a swift motion of her hands. The gang was caught off guard, their confidence shattered by the sudden appearance of this fearless woman. John watched in awe. He had never seen anyone move with such confidence, such purpose. Nayeli was not reckless. Every action was deliberate, every strike calculated. She was more than skilled, she was extraordinary. And yet there was a calmness about her, a certainty that seemed to radiate from her very being. He realized that she was not just saving him, she was teaching him something without words. That courage was not only about strength, but also about presence, awareness, and decisiveness. The fight was swift but intense. Nayeli disarmed the rustlers one by one, her movements precise and efficient. John, though able to fight, realized that without her, he would have been overwhelmed. When the last attacker fell, Nayeli turned to him, her chest heaving slightly, eyes bright and confident. Then, without warning, she pressed her lips to his cheek in a brief, impulsive kiss. John froze, completely unprepared for the gesture. You kissed me while I was out," he blurted, voice a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and gratitude. Nayeli smirked as if the question amused her. "I saved you," she replied simply, her tone confident yet teasing. There was no arrogance, only honesty and pride in her actions. John could only nod, still trying to comprehend the whirlwind of events. She had risked her life without hesitation, and now she stood before him, calm and self-assured, as if nothing had happened. Why did you do that?" he asked, still catching his breath. "Because it needed to be done," Nayeli answered. "You were in danger, and I couldn't just let it happen. You would have done the same if you could." Her eyes gleamed with a mixture of playfulness and seriousness. John realized that her words were both simple and profound. She acted not for recognition, not for reward, but because it was the right thing to do. As the adrenaline faded, John's mind began to clear. He looked at her, noticing the way she stood with confidence, the way her eyes seemed to take in every detail of the canyon, every shadow, every potential threat. He realized that she was more than a skilled fighter. She was a thinker, a strategist, someone who could see beyond the obvious. His respect for her deepened, and alongside it, a quiet curiosity began to grow. The rustlers had fled, scattered, and defeated, but John knew the danger was not entirely gone. The land was vast, and threats could appear anywhere. He mounted Duke again, still processing the encounter. Nayeli moved beside him, her presence steady and reassuring. Though the immediate threat had passed, both knew that the world was unpredictable and that safety was temporary. As they rode together, John finally spoke again, his voice steadier now. I don't even know your name." "Nayeli," she replied, keeping her eyes on the path ahead. "And you are?" "John Harris," he said, extending a hand. She shook it briefly, firm and confident, yet gentle. There was a connection, unspoken yet undeniable, forged in the intensity of shared danger and mutual respect. The ride back to the safer trails was quiet at first, filled with the sounds of the wind and the occasional call of a bird. Both were lost in thought, reflecting on the events that had unfolded. John felt a mixture of awe and gratitude, while Nayeli calculated the next steps carefully, aware that the rustlers could regroup and pose a threat again. Along the way, small moments of connection began to form. John observed how she moved, how she handled herself with ease and precision. Nayeli noticed his attentiveness, his careful consideration of the land and the animals, and the way he treated every creature with respect. Though their lives were different and their worlds seemed separate, they began to recognize shared values: strength, courage, and integrity. By the time they reached a small, shaded area near a stream, the sun had begun to dip low in the sky, casting long shadows across the plains. They dismounted to rest, allowing Duke to drink from the stream while they took a moment to catch their breath. The quiet was comforting, a brief pause between danger and the journey that lay ahead. I can't thank you enough," John said finally, his voice soft, almost vulnerable. "You saved my life, Nayeli. I don't know how I could ever repay you." "You don't need to," she replied simply. "Just remember what you learned today: courage, presence, awareness, and maybe don't wander into danger alone next time." She smirked again, her eyes sparkling with amusement. John could not help but laugh, the tension easing slightly from his shoulders. As the sky turned shades of pink and orange, they prepared to continue their journey. John realized that his life, usually so predictable and structured, had shifted in ways he could not yet fully understand. Nayeli had shown him that the world was larger, more unpredictable, and full of unexpected courage. She had challenged him, saved him, and left a lasting impression he could not ignore. The ride back to the safer parts of the plains was slow, deliberate, each aware of their surroundings and the lingering presence of danger. John and Nayeli moved with quiet coordination, a partnership forming naturally from necessity and shared experience. Though they had only just met, the events of the day had forged a bond that neither could easily forget. By nightfall, they reached a small, hidden clearing where they could rest safely. A fire was built, and the warmth provided comfort against the cool night air. They shared a simple meal, the conversation flowing easily despite the intensity of the day. Stories of past experiences, lessons learned, and the unpredictability of life were exchanged. Each discovered respect and admiration for the other's skills and courage. As the stars emerged in the clear night sky, John realized that his life would never be quite the same. Nayeli had entered his world unexpectedly, bringing danger, excitement, and a new perspective. He understood that their paths were intertwined now, at least for the foreseeable future. And in the quiet of the night, as the fire crackled and the plains settled around them, John felt a strange sense of peace mixed with anticipation. The day had begun with danger, confusion, and uncertainty. It had ended with survival, new understanding, and the beginnings of a bond that neither could have predicted. John Harris had faced threats alone before, but never had he encountered someone like Nayeli, someone whose courage and presence could change the course of a day, a life, and perhaps even the future. They settled near the fire, the night deepening around them. Both were silent for a while, each lost in thought, each reflecting on the strange twists of fate that had brought them together. John thought of the kiss on his cheek, the daring rescue, and the lessons he had learned in the heat of danger. Nayeli thought of the man who had faced peril with skill and determination, yet who had allowed himself to be saved, trusting her instincts without question. As they drifted into a cautious rest, the world outside remained vast and unpredictable. But for this moment, for this night, John and Nayeli shared a rare sense of safety, understanding, and connection, one that had been forged in the crucible of danger and courage, and that would shape the days to come. The sun had barely risen over the distant hills, yet John Harris was already awake. He stretched, feeling the stiffness of the ride the day before, and glanced at Nayeli. She was already moving, packing her small bundle with quiet efficiency, her actions precise and calm. It amazed him how seamlessly she adapted to the land, how every movement seemed intentional, almost part of the terrain itself. There was a grace in her actions that he could not help but admire. They were preparing to journey back toward John's ranch, but the path was not easy. The canyon trails were rugged and narrow, the winds unpredictable, and danger still loomed over the plains. The rustlers were not defeated completely. Their pride and greed ensured they would return if given the chance. Nayeli had insisted on guiding him, and John, knowing he could not face the terrain alone or risk another ambush, accepted her offer. Despite his pride, he recognized that her knowledge and skill were vital. They began moving through the early morning light, Duke and Nayeli's horse stepping carefully over rocks and uneven ground. John noticed how her eyes scanned the horizon constantly, how she sensed subtle changes in the wind, the shadows, and even the sounds of distant birds. He realized that this was a woman who lived with the land as much as the land lived with her. Her instinctive awareness kept them safe, and he felt a mix of relief and admiration with every step. As they traveled, the silence between them was comfortable, punctuated only by the occasional sound of the horses' hooves and the distant calls of birds. John felt a sense of calm, rare for someone who spent most of his days alone with livestock and the endless open plains. Nayeli, for her part, observed him carefully, noting his quiet confidence and the respect he showed toward the land and animals. She recognized a man who, though cautious, had strength and determination, qualities that would serve them well in the days ahead. Hours passed, and they reached a section of the canyon that narrowed sharply, cliffs rising on both sides, creating a natural corridor. John slowed Duke, aware of the potential danger in such confined spaces. The rocks here were loose, the shadows deep, and he sensed movement that did not belong to the wind. Nayeli dismounted quickly, signaling for him to do the same. She moved ahead, her senses alert, ready to act at the first sign of trouble. Suddenly, a rustler emerged from behind a boulder, attempting to catch them off guard. Nayeli reacted immediately, her movements swift and precise. She disarmed him before he could strike, sending him sprawling to the ground. John acted quickly, using his rifle to scare off another attacker who had been hidden in the shadows. The coordination between them was instinctive, a partnership forming out of necessity. Neither spoke much, but every glance, every gesture communicated volumes. Once the immediate threat was neutralized, Nayeli gestured for John to follow her up a narrow, hidden path. It led to a higher vantage point, where they could see the canyon stretched out below them, the plains beyond, and the faint traces of movement suggesting that more rustlers might be nearby. John marveled at her knowledge of the land. She knew every hidden trail, every safe spot, every advantage that the terrain could offer. They paused at the top of the ridge, taking in the view. The canyon below was quiet now, but John knew that danger could return at any time. Nayeli studied him briefly, her expression unreadable, and then nodded toward the path ahead. "We need to move carefully. They may come back and we cannot let them catch us unaware," she said. Her voice was calm but firm, carrying the weight of experience. As they continued their journey, John began to ask questions, not about the danger or the rustlers, but about her. "How did you learn to do all this?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Move like that, fight like that, it's unlike anything I've ever seen." Naeli smiled faintly, a mix of pride and modesty. "My people taught me. We live with the land and we learn to survive. It is not just skill, it is awareness, patience, and courage. Every decision matters." Her words resonated with John. He had always relied on strength and experience, but he now realized that instinct and awareness were equally vital. As they rode on, the terrain became more challenging. Steep slopes, loose rocks, and sudden drops tested their skill and caution. The sun climbed higher and the heat began to weigh on them. They stopped occasionally to rest, drink water from small streams, and check the animals. Each pause allowed them to observe the land, listen to the subtle cues of nature, and strategize the next steps. During one of these breaks, John looked at Naeli more closely. She was quiet now, tending to her horse with care, her movements deliberate. He felt a growing respect for her, not just for her skill in combat, but for her connection to the world around her. She had a presence that was calming, grounding, and somehow inspiring. He found himself wondering how someone could be so fearless, so aware, and yet so human in her emotions. Their journey was not without challenges. As the afternoon wore on, they encountered a narrow gorge with a small creek running through it. The water was clear and cold, but the rocks were slippery, making crossing dangerous. John led Duke carefully, testing each step before moving forward. Naeli, agile and confident, moved ahead of him, guiding him to the safest path. Even a small misstep could have resulted in injury, but with her guidance, they crossed safely. Once across, they continued along a trail that wound through a series of hills and valleys. The landscape shifted constantly, from rocky cliffs to grassy meadows, from shaded woods to open plains. Each change brought new challenges and new opportunities to test their skills. John noticed how Naeli adapted seamlessly to every situation, her movements fluid, precise, and efficient. She was like the land itself, ever-changing yet steady and strong. As evening approached, the sky turned shades of orange, pink, and purple. They found a safe clearing to rest, building a small fire for warmth and preparing a modest meal. The firelight danced across their faces, casting shadows that seemed to tell their own story of the day's events. John felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. The danger, the adrenaline, the constant need to stay alert. It had been intense, yet he felt alive in a way he had not felt in years. Naeli, sitting across from him, studied the fire thoughtfully. She had noticed the way John handled himself in the canyon and on the trails, and she could see the growth in his awareness and skill. He was learning quickly, adapting to situations that would have challenged even seasoned frontiersmen. She felt a quiet sense of satisfaction, knowing that her guidance was making a difference, that he could now navigate danger more effectively. They ate in silence for a while, the crackling fire providing a comforting background to their thoughts. Finally, John spoke, breaking the quiet. "You've taught me so much today, more than I ever expected to learn in a single day. I don't know how to repay you." Naeli smiled, a small, genuine curve of her lips. "You don't need to repay me, just remember what you learned. Be aware, be cautious, but do not fear. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is acting despite it." Her words sank deep into John's mind. He realized that her philosophy was simple yet profound, a lesson he would carry with him long after the journey ended. The night settled around them, cool and quiet. Stars emerged one by one in the clear sky, shining like tiny beacons over the vast plains. John lay back against a rock, staring upward, reflecting on the day's events. Naeli sat nearby, her gaze also fixed on the stars, lost in thought. Both understood the significance of what had happened, the danger, the survival, the bond that had formed between them. As they rested, they spoke in low tones about their pasts, their experiences, and the paths that had led them to this moment. John shared stories of life on the ranch, of hard work, and of the solitude he had grown accustomed to. Naeli spoke of her people, their connection to the land, and the lessons she had learned from living in harmony with nature. Each story built trust, understanding, and a sense of shared humanity. The fire burned low and the night grew colder. They huddled closer, drawing warmth from each other and the fire. Though the journey ahead was still uncertain, they felt a sense of preparedness and determination. Together, they had faced danger, survived, and learned from each other. The partnership that had formed was not just born of necessity, but of mutual respect, trust, and an unspoken bond. In the quiet of the night, John felt a strange mixture of emotions: gratitude, admiration, curiosity, and something more he could not yet name. Naomi's presence had shifted something within him, opening his mind and heart to new possibilities. He realized that life was unpredictable, and that moments like these, moments of courage, connection, and survival, were precious and rare. As the fire dwindled to embers, they settled for the night, each lost in their own thoughts yet aware of the other's presence. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more unknown dangers, and more opportunities to test their skills and courage. But for now, in the quiet of the night under a canopy of stars, John Harris and Naomi shared a rare moment of peace, understanding, and connection that would stay with them forever. The first light of dawn spilled over the horizon, painting the plains in soft shades of gold and pink. John Harris woke to the sound of birds calling and the gentle rustle of the wind through the grass. The events of the past days had left him exhausted, yet alert. He stretched, feeling the aches from the long journey and the tension of their encounters with the rustlers. But there was also a strange sense of calm. He glanced at Naomi, who was already moving with her usual precision, packing her things and preparing for the day ahead. Their journey back to the ranch was not yet over. Though they had survived multiple dangers, John knew that the rustlers had not been completely defeated. Naomi had kept a watchful eye on the land, observing from high ridges and distant hills, and she insisted on guiding John all the way back to safety. He trusted her judgment completely. Her confidence and skill had been proven time and time again, and he knew that trying to face the dangers alone would be foolish. As they rode together across the open plains, the bond between them had grown stronger. They had faced threats side by side, navigated difficult terrain, and shared moments of quiet reflection. Each had gained a new respect for the other. John admired Naomi's courage, her quick thinking, and her connection to the land. Naomi, in turn, saw John's resilience, his patience, and his determination to survive and protect what mattered to him. It was a silent partnership, built on trust and shared experiences. The day passed with both of them alert to every sound and movement. They crossed shallow rivers, climbed steep hills, and navigated narrow trails. John noticed how Naomi moved with ease across terrain that would have challenged even the most experienced rancher. Her awareness of the environment, her ability to anticipate danger, and her calm in the face of uncertainty amazed him. He realized that she was more than a protector. She was a teacher, showing him how to move through the world with care and purpose. During a brief rest by a small stream, John watched Naomi as she knelt to water her horse. The sunlight caught her hair, highlighting the strands that had escaped her braid. She seemed at peace in that moment, connected to the land in a way he had never experienced. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for her guidance and protection. "You've taught me so much," he said quietly, almost to himself. "I don't think I've ever learned like this before." Naomi looked at him, her dark eyes thoughtful. "Learning comes from experience, from paying attention, and from trusting those who guide you. You have been brave, John. That matters too. It is not only my skill that keeps us safe. It is your courage, your focus, your willingness to follow when needed." Her words made John reflect on the partnership they had formed. It was not one-sided. Both of them had contributed, both had relied on the other, and both had grown stronger because of it. As they continued their journey, the land began to open up, leading toward the edges of John's ranch. The familiar sights of home, the fences, the grazing cattle, the distant barns, brought a sense of relief. Yet John knew that even here, danger could appear unexpectedly. The rustlers might attempt one final strike, and he remained cautious. Naomi's presence was reassuring, a constant reminder that skill and awareness could overcome even the most dangerous situations. By late afternoon, they reached a stretch of open pasture near the ranch. The cattle grazed quietly, unaware of the danger that had been so close days before. John slowed Duke and let the horse step carefully across the soft ground. Naomi moved beside him, scanning the surroundings with the same sharp attention she had shown throughout their journey. It was as if danger could still be hiding in the grass, in the shadows, or even in the wind. Suddenly, a movement caught their attention, a figure darting across the distant hills. John's heart quickened. Could it be the rustlers returning? Naomi raised her hand, signaling for him to stay calm. She dismounted swiftly, moving toward the figure with practiced stealth. John followed, careful to keep up without making noise. The tension in the air was palpable, each step measured, each breath controlled. When they reached a higher ridge, they saw the figure more clearly. It was a lone rustler, likely scouting or attempting one last attempt at theft. Nayeli acted without hesitation. Using the terrain to her advantage, she approached silently, disarming the man and rendering him powerless before he could react. John watched, a mix of relief and admiration filling him. She had once again demonstrated her skill and courage, keeping them safe with calm precision. With the immediate threat neutralized, they returned to the ranch. John felt a wave of relief as the familiar buildings came into view. His home had been untouched during their absence, thanks to Nayeli's vigilance. The animals were safe, and the land seemed peaceful once more. He realized that the danger, while present, had been met with courage, skill, and partnership. And it had left him changed in ways he could not yet fully understand. As the sun dipped low in the sky, painting the plains in shades of orange and purple, John and Nayeli tended to their horses, watered the livestock, and secured the fences. It was routine work, but it carried a sense of significance now. They had survived danger together, learned from each other, and returned to safety. The ordinary tasks of ranch life felt richer, more meaningful, now that he had seen what courage and partnership could accomplish. That evening they sat by a small fire near the barn. The stars emerged one by one in the clear night sky, and the cool breeze carried the scent of grass and earth. John reflected on the journey they had shared, the danger, the lessons, and the connection that had formed between them. Nayeli's presence had transformed the experience, turning fear into respect, uncertainty into trust, and survival into understanding. "You know," John said, breaking the silence, "I never expected my life to change like this. I thought I knew the land, the dangers, and myself. But you've shown me things I never imagined." He looked at her, his expression a mixture of gratitude and admiration. Nayeli smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "The world is larger than we see, John. Danger can come from anywhere, but so can courage and connection. You have faced the land, the threats, and yourself with bravery. That is what matters." Her words carried wisdom and simplicity, a reminder that life's lessons were often found in the most unexpected experiences. John nodded, feeling a sense of clarity. He realized that their journey had not only been about survival, but also about growth. He had learned to trust, to act with awareness, and to appreciate the unexpected gifts that life could offer. Nayeli had been the guide, the protector, and the teacher, but he had also contributed with his courage, his focus, and his determination. Together they had created something enduring, a bond forged in the fires of challenge and respect. As the night deepened, the ranch fell into quiet calm. The cattle settled for the evening, the wind whispered through the trees, and the stars shone brightly above. John and Nayeli prepared to rest, knowing that tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, and more opportunities to apply what they had learned. Yet there was a sense of peace that neither had experienced before. They had survived, they had grown, and they had connected in ways that would shape their futures. Before they slept, John turned to Nayeli once more. "Thank you," he said softly. "Not just for saving my life, but for everything, for showing me courage, trust, and a different way to see the world." Nayeli's expression softened, her smirk replaced by a quiet warmth. "You have thanked me well, John. But remember, it is not about me or you, it is about the choices we make, the courage we show, and the respect we give. That is what endures." The fire burned low, the cool night air carrying the scent of grass and earth. John lay back, staring at the stars, reflecting on the extraordinary journey they had shared. Nayeli rested nearby, vigilant even in sleep, her connection to the land and to him unwavering. Together they had faced danger, survived, and grown. They had discovered that courage, trust, and understanding were powerful forces, capable of shaping lives and forging bonds that could not be broken. As the hours passed, sleep claimed them both, bringing rest after the trials of the day. In their dreams, the canyon, the plains, and the ridges were alive with the echoes of courage, skill, and connection. They had faced the unknown together, and the experience had left them stronger, wiser, and forever changed. By morning, the ranch was bathed in sunlight once again. Life continued, cattle grazed, fences needed repair, and the land demanded attention. Yet the events of the past days had left a lasting mark. John and Nayeli had faced danger, discovered trust, and formed a bond that would endure. They had learned that life was unpredictable, that courage could come in many forms, and that connection could arise even in the most unlikely circumstances. As they began another day on the ranch, the horizon stretched wide and endless before them. The world was full of possibilities, challenges, and opportunities to grow. John and Nayeli moved together, partners in action and understanding, ready to face whatever the future held. And as the wind whispered through the grass and the sun rose higher, they knew that the bond they had forged, through danger, courage, and trust, would guide them through the days to come. The ranch, the plains, and the canyon had witnessed their trials, and in return, they had shaped two lives in ways that neither could have anticipated. The journey had begun with danger and uncertainty, but it ended with understanding, respect, and a connection that would last a lifetime. The story of the rancher and the Apache woman became one not only of survival, but of transformation, a testament to courage, partnership, and the unexpected ways that life can change when two people meet in extraordinary circumstances.